This is a Going Back, Remembering UGA interview with Mr. Charley Trippi, conducted by Fran on December 5th, 2006. Today we're at the University of Georgia Visitor Center in the Four Towers building on College Station Road in Athens, Georgia. Thank you for being with us today, Mr. Trippi.
Charley.
Thank you for being with us today, Charley.
That's better.
You know, I understand that there is a Charley Trippi Stadium in Pittston, Pennsylvania. What an honor.
That's correct.
And how lucky for the people of Pittston that you're a native son. Please tell us a little bit about your early days.
Well, I grew up in a anthracite mining community where everybody worked awfully hard. They mined coal, and it was a dangerous job, really, to start with. A lot of people got killed there because of that. Of course, I grew up during the Depression, which, in my case, gave me inspiration to do something out of my life because I didn't want to ever work in the mines. Regardless what happened, I would never stay there. So I had to pursue something that would enlighten my career. So at an early stage, I was playing baseball and football with people much older than me. I was playing semi-professional baseball when I was in high school. So I learned to adapt myself to sports, and it paid off because if I stayed there, I don't know what would have happened. So I'm very fortunate in a way.
Well, now tell me how you got from Pittston, Pennsylvania to
That's
Athens, Georgia.
That's an easy question to answer because when I was in high school, I played on an undefeated football team. I only weighed about 160 pounds. And I wanted to pursue football at the college level. I was turned down by 4 different colleges before I got an invitation to visit Georgia. It so happened after 4 failures, this gentleman, his name was War Eagle Ketron, who was a former alumnus of Georgia and a football player from Georgia, came to my house one Sunday morning and asked me, he says, "Son, would you like to go and visit the University of Georgia?" I never heard of Georgia, you know. I always knew Georgia Tech, but I never realized there was a Georgia affiliation. I said, sure, I'd go any place then. So he said, well, I'm going to send you with 3 other athletes, and I have a coach that's going to escort you. I said, fine. He says, I'm going to send you during your Christmas vacation. So the day came that we were leaving. Our first stop was Penn State. I spent 24 hours at Penn State, and I'm yet to meet a coach. I had no contact at all because I was with 3 other fellas who are over 6 feet tall and weighed over 200 pounds. And here I am at 160 pounds trying to get a scholarship. So I was completely ignored, which I took for granted that maybe I wasn't a viable candidate for a scholarship. So our next stop was, we went to Georgia. And when we got to Georgia, we received a very good reception, and they took us all to dinner at Passa's Barbecue. I remember that, and they were very cordial and, of course, very excited about having all these fine athletes there with me. So they asked if we would work out. I said, sure, I'd be glad to work out. So they gave us equipment to dress out and work on the football field. And of course, I punted for them. I threw passes, and they timed me in the 40-yard dash to see what kind of speed I had. And prior to leaving Georgia, I received a commitment from Georgia. They said, we'd like for you to come and be one of the football players. I says, I'd be glad to when the time came after I finished high school. So after we left Georgia, we went to West Virginia. We stopped there. And of course, the same thing happened there that other schools happened. They couldn't do enough to entice the three other fellows I was with, and I was there in the background more or less. And prior to us leaving, one of the coaches came to me very apologetic and says, I don't think we could give you a scholarship. I said, well, fine. I says, I feel like I already have a commitment to Georgia. So I left. And when I got home, my backfield coach by the name of Paul Chevy said, Charlie, he says, I have a scholarship for you at LaSalle Military Academy if you would like to take it, which was in Long Island, New York. I says, yes. I says, I would like to go because I think a little bit more experience, maybe I gained a little more weight, I'd be a more viable athlete than I am right now. So I went to prep school, and while there, I gained 10 pounds because they had a dinner menu that they gave you all you can eat buffet style food, and I ate real good, and I gained 10 pounds the period of time I was there. And I played on a very good football team, and I made the all-metropolitan team in New York. And anytime you do anything good in New York in athletics, you get a lot of good exposure. And that I got. And as soon as that happened, Notre Dame came to my house. They didn't send one coach, they sent two coaches and tried to induce me to go to Notre Dame. I says, I already committed myself to Georgia. And while I was waiting to go to Georgia, I had a job with Mr. Ketron, the alumnus from Georgia who played at Georgia, was the manager of a Coca-Cola plant. And he says, son, he says, as long as you go to Georgia, you'll always have a job here with the Coca-Cola company. So when I graduated on Friday, that Monday morning, I'm driving a Coca-Cola truck and I have a route. And I'm making more money than my dad. My dad back then, during the Depression, was on WPA, making $90 a month, supporting 5 children. And I was making between $25 and $30 a week. I'm making more money than my father. Plus, I was playing semi-pro baseball, and I was making $5 every Sunday playing with the team. They paid me to play. I says, good. So, of course, when I came to Georgia, I didn't know what really was going to transpire because I heard a lot of bad things about Georgia. I had one failure. Some fellow that came to Georgia and told me, boy, when you go to Georgia, he says it's like a meat house down there. They just scrimmage all the time and knock the hell out of you and everything like that. He kind of discouraged me. But when I came to Georgia, I have a job to do because here I am playing the same position as an All-American, Frank Sinkwich, you know, and who was being touted to be a Heisman Award winner. And I said to myself, boy, I got a job to do here. So my sophomore year, I was having token playing time the first 3 games of the season in 1942. But apparently what I did during that period of time, the coaches were impressed. So I did probably something that the team never experienced. They put me in the backfield with Frank, and Frank moved to fullback, and I was the tailback. And of course, we went on to win 10 out of 11 games that year, and we ended up in the Rose Bowl. And when we got out to the Rose Bowl, Frank came up with 2 bad ankles. And the day before the Rose Bowl game, Coach Butts corners me and says, you know, Charlie, he says, you're going to have to go all the way because Frank cannot play. I says, well, I'm ready to play. I says, whatever happens, I don't know, but I'm ready to play. So I did play 58 minutes of that game, which is very unusual today. Back then, we played on both sides of the football. We played offense and defense. Coach Butts had a philosophy in football: if you can't play defense, you can't play offense. So we adapted to that sort of system, and to me, I played in a lot of outstanding games during my career, but the Rose Bowl will always stick out, being probably the greatest thrill I ever got out of football. While I was at Georgia, I played in three bowl games. I played in a game in Montgomery, Alabama, North-South game. I played in that. Then I played in 4 college all-star games. I'm the only guy that ever played in 4 college all-star games in Chicago. Back then, they didn't have rules when you was in the service. I'd always allocate my furlough to play in the game, which I did. And I also played the 5th time in the all-star game as a pro. When you won the championship game, then the next year you played the college all-stars, and that's what we did. So I had a fabulous career. I earned a lot of good things from it, and of course I was paid very well. I know when I went into professional football, the perception back then was, you know, if you could get a good contract back then, you was very fortunate. But it so happened when I negotiated my contract, I was negotiating with a new football league that was organizing, the American Football League. They had two different pro team organizations, and of course I was negotiating between both of them. I was negotiating with the New York Yankees and the Cardinals. I went to New York to discuss the contract, and I was kind of a little apprehensive about their dealings, because I was in the market then to play both professional baseball and football. So in 1947, Earl Mann came to see me play, and and signed me up to a contract. He gave me $10,000 bonus. He says, Charlie, he says, this is the most money I've ever given a ball player to play in AA baseball. He says, you know, he says, it's going to be a lot different playing than you had playing in college baseball. I says, Mr. Mann, I says, you can't give me enough money for me to go to Atlanta and embarrass myself. I says, I'm going there because I know I could play, because I played in the service with major leaguers and I competed on the same level with them and did quite well. I says, I'm signing with you because I know I can play. And that I did. I hit .335 for him, and the next year he wanted to sell me to the Boston Red Sox, but I had such a lucrative contract playing football, I didn't want to give that up. So when I signed up with the Cardinals, I signed a 4-year contract for $100,000. Back then, that was way out of line. People didn't realize that you could make that much money playing professional football. But today, I'm embarrassed to say I only made $25,000, because now they're making millions. I never dreamed that anybody playing professional football would ever make $1 million, which is occurring today. So when I've finished negotiating those contracts, of course, the first year I go up with the Cardinals, we win the World's Championship, the National Football League. We win the championship, you know, and of course then people start realizing that I was worth what I was getting. So I managed to put all that together, and as life went on, I played 9 years with the Cardinals, and ended up coaching 5 years with them. So I spent 14 years with the Chicago Cardinals. And after I finished coaching with the Cardinals, I coached with Coach Butts 5 years here at the University of Georgia. But when I started coaching with Coach Butts, it was a different sort of atmosphere, because for the longest time, I never could confront Coach Butts and be comfortable talking with him until I started coaching with him. But when you coach with a guy and you spend 15 hours a day on the both football field and in meetings and everything, then you got to know him real good. The funny thing about Coach Butts is we were playing Florida one year, and we got down near the goal line. We had fourth and about 10, 12 yards to go to score on the fourth down. I says, Coach, I says, don't you think we ought to kick a field goal? And his answer was, no, he says, you don't ever win football games with field goals. I just got back from professional football, and I knew what field goals did to a football team. So I didn't answer him because I never talked back to Coach Butts. Whatever he said was the scheme of the day. We had a good place kicker back in 1942, Leo Costa. He was a good extra point kicker. Would you believe he played 3 years at Georgia and never kicked a field goal? That's almost impossible to believe. In the era that you see today, the field goals. I watched a football game the other day, and the score ended up 9-6, and they kicked 5 field goals in that game. So if Coach Butts was alive today, he wouldn't believe what was actually occurring on football fields.
Charlie, talk some more about some of the other coaches you had. I know was it Coach Whitworth?
Well, when I coached at Georgia, Coach Whitworth was the line coach. I was the backfield coach. We had a guy by the name of Gregory was the end coach. And Paul, I can't think of his name. He ended up coaching at Auburn, was one of the line coaches. Paul, I can't think of his name, but we had, back then we had staffs that I think each position, we had a coach for each position, a defensive coach, a defensive line coach, offensive line. Wyatt Posey was the offensive line coach, and I was the offensive back coach, and then we had somebody for the defensive coach. It was well organized, and you see that today. They have a coach for almost every position. I imagine they must have about 10 coaches on the staff today, at least that many, yeah.
Okay. Talk to us a little bit. Let's go back to your arrival on the campus. What was your very first impression? You've said you had a very nice welcome, but coming at Christmas time down to Athens from Pennsylvania, what was your impression of the physical appearance of the campus? Was it?
Well, my impression wasn't too good when I left Pittston, because I got on a Greyhound bus and it took me a day and a half to get to Athens.
You were worn out, huh?
But I wanted to get there. Even if it took a week, I wanted to go there, because that was the only chance I had in my life to improve my life, because I wanted to play football. I wanted to make a contribution to the program wherever I went. It happened to be Georgia, and that's where I ended up.
You were at school here at a tumultuous time. The war interrupted your schooling. What was life like on campus? I know.
Well, I think we only had about 2,500 students, and we got to know each other a lot easier than it is today. I guess they got 35,000. I don't know whether I'd be comfortable in a school that has 35,000, but we had good relationships back when I first came to Georgia. We got to know everybody, and we spent a lot of time on the campus talking, and or going into the drugstore, Moonwind, and having a Coke or something like that. But the relationship back then was a lot closer than it is today. Nobody had any automobiles and nobody had any money, period. When I came to Georgia, my scholarship was I got $10 a month and they did my laundry. That was it. And $10 took care of everything that I had to do. If I wanted to buy a Coke, if I wanted to go to the varsity, if I wanted to buy shaving cream or anything of that nature, that was it. That's what I lived on.
That's amazing.
But my first year at Christmas, see, I established myself as a football player my freshman year. You know, they were quite happy with me. And the Orange Bowl, the team was going to the Orange Bowl that year, and Coach Butts asked me if I wanted to go, and I said, no, I wanted to go home. He says, well, he says, that's up to you. So when it came time to go home, I didn't have any money to take the bus. So Coach Hollis was in charge of things back then.
That's Howell Hollis?
Yeah, and I went to I went to see Coach Hollis, and I says, Coach, I need money to go home. I need a bus ticket. I don't want money. Just give me a bus ticket to go home and come back. He says, well, we can't do that. I says, well, he says, I only can give you a one-way ticket. I said, fine. I says, if you want me, come and get me. I says, I'll stay home. He said, wait a while. He says, I'll give you the other ticket. He says, I knew right then and there they wanted me to play football at Georgia because I already established myself as a freshman. So I said, well, I says, if you only want to give me one way, fine. I says, if you want me back, come and get me. So he finally agreed to give me a bus ticket to go both ways.
A round trip ticket. Found a way to do that, huh, to get you back.
Yeah, to come back, yeah.
What was your major in college?
Well, I started out in business school. I believe my first 2 years I was in business school. Then I went into service. Mm-hmm. Then I got back. I got out of the service in let me see, October, around the end of October, and I was already 1 month behind in my education to pursue a business education. So I switched to phys ed, where I knew I could probably pass my work then. And I was afraid if I pursued a business education, I was so far behind that I might flunk out. I didn't want to do that. I mean, there's 3 things I wanted to do when I left home. Number 1, I wanted to get a college degree. Number 2, I wanted to make All-America. Number 3, establish myself where I give my family a decent standard of living, which I accomplished, and that's what I wanted to do.
Reached all your goals.
Beg pardon?
Reached all your goals.
Yes, yes.
Right. Do you remember a favorite professor?
I had one, I think his name was Armstrong, and he was quite a sports fan, and he was a golfer, and I would communicate with him, and I had him in my, when I first was taking business under him. I think it was, I think it was Business 6 or something like that, and we always had a worksheet to fill out and everything of that nature, and I was always business oriented, and I enjoyed the business aspect of my education, but as I said earlier, I got so far behind when I got out of the service, I was afraid to pursue it because I might flunk out, and I didn't want to do that.
No,
I mean, I didn't ever want to go home as a failure. That was one thing. When I left home, I was going to come back as a form of success in some way, either in education or in athletics or in business or something like that. I just didn't ever want to be a failure in anything.
You more than did that when you
Well,
went home.
I tried to do that, yeah.
What was life like on campus? I know social life. You were in a fraternity. You're Lambda Chi.
Well, I was in Lambda Chi because they paid for me to be one. I didn't have the money to join a fraternity back then. There was a gentleman out of Alabama. Oh, I forget his name. He was a big Lambda Chi man and says, "We want you in our fraternity, and we're going to take care of all the expenses." I said, "Well, it's a good thing because I haven't got the money. I only have $10 a month." And that's the only way I got into the fraternity, because they paid for it.
Where did you live on campus? Did you live on campus or off campus?
No, we had a football dormitory, Payne Hall.
Payne was the football.
That was our football dormitory, and in the basement there was our dining room, and we eat our meals there and go to class from there.
And the stadium was right behind you
And
then.
the stadium was right there.
Right.
Yeah, and talking about the stadium, I've always said the worst possible scenario you can ever have in football is to have the practice field next to the stadium. Because if things didn't go to suit Coach Butts during practice, we'd move into the stadium, put the lights on, and end up eating dinner at 8:30 at night.
Just practice some more, huh?
Practice had to be perfect for him to say, well, okay, we're finished. But if it didn't, we'd move into the stadium. So I tell everybody, don't ever go to college where they have the practice field next to the stadium.
Oh. Well, the New Georgia Encyclopedia, as I did a little research on you, said that Coach Bear Bryant said that Trippi was the greatest college football player ever.
Well, that's debatable.
Well,
I don't know.
I think
I had good days against them. You know, a lot of times when you have a good day against a team, the coach is impressed. Like Bobby Dodd has said the same thing. Of course, against Georgia Tech, of course, I had very unusual days against them, because the three years I played against Georgia Tech, we scored over 100 points. And they only scored 7 in 3 years, which doesn't seem possible, but that's exactly what happened. And of course, when you have big days against certain coaches, they get impressed and then they make statements like that.
what you mentioned earlier, that probably the Rose Bowl was the time that the thing that is most memorable to you.
Oh, the Rose Bowl has a certain mystique about it. You know, when you step on there, the adrenaline just works up to a pitch that you can't wait for the game to start. I know we went to practice the day before the Rose Bowl game, and my gosh, you can feel the adrenaline pumping, you know, and you just can't wait for the game to start. And as I said earlier, I really got my money's worth. I played 58 minutes of that game, which was great. Actually, if they said sleep here tonight, I would have, because you don't get that opportunity to play in the Rose Bowl game but once in a lifetime, and that was the making of my career, really, playing in the Rose Bowl.
Talk about the festivities that went on, all the things that went on. You were out there, weren't you?
Yes. Paramount had a luncheon for us. They had all the movie stars, and I sat between Barbara Britton and Susan Hayward, the two stars.
Not a bad seat.
And all the athletes sat between a movie star, which was great, you know. And Bob Hope was there. Ginger Rogers was there.
My.
Susan Hayward was there. Barbara Britton. All the stars that belonged to Paramount were there, and they really put on a good show for us. And after the game, we were entertained at Errol Carroll, which featured, they said, the most beautiful women in the world, where they put on a show for us and everything like that. So we were entertained. We stayed out there 3 days after the game, and then the Stars invited us to their places. I'm trying to think of the Georgia girl that invited us over. 5 of us went over to her.
Evelyn Keys?
No. She used to do a soap commercial. Oh, I can't think of her name right now, but we went to her place. They had a nice swimming pool there, and we had lunch there with them. Oh, it was just fabulous, you know. I didn't think life could be that good.
Quite an experience. Then the war intervened.
Yes.
And were you Army Air Corps? Is that what you were? Or?
I was in the Air Force, yes.
Where were you, Charlie?
Well, I started out in Greensboro. I played both baseball and football there. Then I went to the 3rd Air Force in Charlotte, played on the 3rd Air Force football team. Then from there, we went to our headquarters in Tampa. So I hadn't played football there. But I lived out at Clearwater Beach. So what we did, most of us lived out there. We'd commute back and forth. We'd go to practice in the morning at the base. We'd have lunch, and then we'd go home. That was our job for the day. We had no duties at all. All we did was practice football and go home and go to the beach.
So you represented the Air Force on a football team for your years?
Yes. That's all I did in the service. I never held a gun. I never went to bivouac. I never did anything. All I did was play baseball and football. I didn't feel like I was in the service, really.
And y'all won, too, I bet.
Yes. Yeah, we had good teams, yes.
You returned to Athens for part of the 1945 season, was that right?
Yes. As I expressed earlier, I was a month late getting it. They already played 5 games when I got here, see.
But they were able to work you into school and onto the field before the end of the season, right?
Yes.
And
yes.
Was that the season you went to the Oil Bowl?
The Oil Bowl, yeah. We played Tulsa in the Oil Bowl, yeah.
And then in 1946, you were the captain of the team.
That's right.
And it was an undefeated season.
Undefeated, and we went to the Sugar Bowl.
SEC championship?
Yes, yes.
Another memorable year while you were there?
That was a great year because it was my last year, and I was the captain of the team, and I wanted to leave on a good note, you know, and get ready for professional football.
What were some of the highlights of that year? And was Johnny Roush the
Johnny
quarterback?
Roush was the quarterback, and a good quarterback. Johnny Roush started out as a freshman and played in 4 bowl games as a quarterback, which is a record, you know. Normally, you know, freshmen are to be seen and not to be active on the football field. But he did the job and did quite well.
Well, those freshman quarterbacks, as we have seen this fall, can make a difference, can't they?
Yes, they can if they're good.
That's right.
Yeah. Normally, you know, you don't want to play them too quick or they lose their confidence. You want to build up their confidence, if anything, and play them accordingly to the situation of the game. But this kid Stafford's going to be a good quarterback because he's big, he's strong, and he's got a good arm. And the experience he got this year, he's going to be a lot better next year. And he will progress each year he plays.
That sounds good. Sounds good coming from you to the rest of us. So you played in, you indicated earlier that you decided not to go into professional baseball, but to concentrate solely on pro football.
That's true, because I already made a commitment with the Cardinals. As I said, I had a contract that baseball could not match, really. Back then, baseball wasn't really a high-paid profession unless you establish yourself in the league and played 3-4 years, then you could command a pretty good salary. But if I started out in baseball back then, I probably would have made about $10,000 compared to 25. I could see the difference.
Right. Talk to us, describe the dream backfield of the Chicago Cardinals, and you did win the NFL championship that first year. Talk a little bit about that.
Well, the dream backfield was a group of men that we all pulled for each other. We had a good chemistry between us, and we enjoyed watching each guy do good on the football field. And we always felt, regardless who scored, the team scored. And we never looked back and said one guy won the game or lost the game. We were a team, and that's the way we played as the dream backfield. And as I said, we enjoyed watching each of us do good on the field. And of course, when you win a national football championship, that's about the best prize you can get in professional football.
The top.
And then the following year, we had a better team in '48, and we lost in the championship game in Philadelphia. We played in a foot of snow almost. You couldn't even see the lines, and the officials improvised the game as we went on. They'd say, first down, so what? First down. You couldn't say measure because you couldn't see the lines. So it wasn't really a football game. Actually, what the commissioner should have done then, and he was there, he should have called the game off and say, but this is not a football game.
Can't play today.
Here we are, we played all year to reach that point and then play under those conditions. And the fans got cheated too, because it really it was a push and pull. And we lost that game 7-0, so it wasn't really an exhibition of football.
Who was the coach of the Cardinals, and who was in the dream backfield?
Well, our coach was Jimmy Councilman, quite an individual, sharp individual. And the dream backfield had Paul Chrisman from Missouri was our quarterback. Elmer Angsman from actually Marshall Goldberg started out as part of the dream backfield, but then he went to defense. Marshall played at Pittsburgh, but Elmer Angsman was a Notre Dame ball player. Pat Harder was from Wisconsin, of course, and I played from Georgia. That was the makeup of the team.
And you all ended up playing the Philadelphia Eagles twice, 47
Twice
and
in
48?
championship games, yes. We reached the championship plateau 2 years in a row.
And so you thought that was the way it ought to be every year, didn't you?
Boy, I was fooled, but you know, when you win like that, you become more susceptible to being beaten because everybody likes to be the champion.
Right. You're right. It's fun to win.
You're not kidding.
Well, you played 9 seasons for Chicago?
9 seasons, then coached 5 years with them. So actually, I spent 14 years with them.
Did you enjoy coaching?
Yes, yes.
And then came to Georgia and coached here a little?
And then I coached here 5 years.
Now, do I have it right? Weren't you the head baseball coach here?
Yes,
once?
2 years. I coached baseball.
That's great. Talk to us a little bit about your family.
Well, I have a family. I have 3 children. My first wife died in 1971, and one of my daughters went to the University of Georgia. She graduated, and today she's a teacher in Cocoa, Florida, doing quite well. She ended up with a doctorate degree. And my one daughter works for Thornton Brothers. She does all the administration. And I have a son, Charles, who's in Atlanta working over there with some outfit. They work with communications and things of that nature. So I remarried, let me see, it's been 29 years ago. I married my present wife, and between us now we have 6 children and 15 grandchildren.
Goodness.
We have a house full.
You do. Well, I think here's somebody, you were selected to the College Football Hall of Fame, the Pro Football Hall of Fame, the Rose Bowl Hall of Fame, the Georgia Sports Hall of Fame, won the Maxwell Award.
Yeah.
Have been successful in your life, Charlie. Have a
Yes.
wonderful family.
Yes, thank you.
You know, and can get on your roof to clean out the gutters. It's been a
that's my hobby, taking care of my house, my
Yeah.
yard, and
we're
everything is necessary I do.
well, you know, just a wonderful life, and I know that there's more. We're going to look forward to more awards and outstanding things from you, right?
I don't know. Are there any more left?
I don't think so. I think you've won them all.
You left out, I'm in the Pennsylvania Hall of Fame. I'm in the Italian Hall of Fame.
Oh, I'm going to add those to the list.
I'm just Hall of Famed out.
Do you gentlemen have anything else that you'd like to?
I have a question about the Rose Bowl, Mr. Trippi. I understand that the January 42 was a month after Pearl Harbor, and there was some anxiety about the Japanese attack of the West Coast. Would that ever play into your about the Rose Bowl?
I think in 1941 it happened more than in 42. As you know, in 1941 they changed it. They played it in Durham, North Carolina, the Rose Bowl game. People don't realize that because of the danger. When the war started, they were afraid they might attack.
Yeah, because Pearl Harbor was December the 7th, 41, wasn't it?
Yeah.
And so it was within a month.
Yeah. So they changed that game to Durham. And of course, the following year, things kind of eased up a little, and we played it in California.
Mm-hmm. That's interesting. Anything else?
No, ma'am.
Charlie, we've loved having you.
Well, I enjoyed it. I'm waiting for Claude to
No,
come up with something.
I'm in awe.
Oh,
I have a question.
what's that?
Why were you number 62?
That's a good question. Well, when I was a freshman, I got in line to get a jersey. The guy in front of me got 61, so I got 62.
Is that right?
Yeah.
So they didn't divide the team the way we do now with the backs having the lower numbers?
Back then, you didn't know, I never would ask to change because I was always afraid. See, with Coach Butts, you didn't negotiate anything.
He was a tough guy.
All he wanted to do, he wanted you to perform. But if I had to do it over again, I would have started out what my number was in high school, number 10. Mm-hmm. That's what I really would love. So I started out with 62. Then I started, then when I got into pro football, I wore 62. Then they changed the rules.
Mm-hmm.
See, to play in the backfield was from, I think you could use smaller numbers, like a 1, a 2, a 3, and 62 would be a guard.
Right.
And 70s were tackles, and 80s were ends. And now, if you was a defensive back, you could wear any number. But when they changed the numbers, they said now, if you I had the option to keep 62, but in order to do that, every time I'd come into the football game, I'd have to report to the official. If I didn't, we'd be penalized. So I said, oh, heck on that. I said, I don't want to ever put my team in jeopardy because of my stupidity, not asking to play. So I changed it to number 2. I took half of it. So that's why I ended up with number 2.
My secretary has brought something in for you to sign today for her
I'd be
husband,
glad
and
to.
she has a story about 62 that she wants to tell you.
Oh, fine.
She wants to tell you about that. So.
I didn't know there was a story about it.
Well, it's about her husband who idolized you.
Oh, I
so she'll
see.
tell you that, I'm sure.
Are you finished?